Time for another Splatter Western Roundup. Welcome to the depths. Hello, welcome to Reading from the Depths. My name is Lecton. Thank you for joining me. Today, I have a roundup of a few different Splatter Western titles. It includes 4 comic one-sheets and a novella, and I don't have a lot to say on any of them, so I thought I would do them all at once. This is part of my ongoing project to read all of the novels and novellas in the Splatter Western series, which is a series that is published by Death Head Press, an imprint of Dead Sky Publishing. By the end of 2024, they'll have 23 novels and novellas published, as well as these 4 comic one-sheets. And the whole ethos of the Splatter Western series is combining westerns with horror and splatterpunk. And so they have all different types of horror combined across the series. They're standalone for the most part. They're written by different authors. They have independent stories. And so far, I've had a lot of fun reading them, and I have an ongoing project to read all of them in the series. When we're reading 1 or 2 a month, we'll see how long it takes. So this is my continuation of that today. Like I said, I have the 4 one-sheets. So these 4 comics were released last year, October, November, December, and then January of 2024. And then I have one of the more recent novellas also. So the 4 comics. The first one that was released in October is called Swallower of Shades. This is by J.M. Brandt. And I apologize, I don't have the name of the illustrators on top of my head, but I'll include it down in the show notes. The story of this one is very simple. It is a traveling freak show, essentially, and they inherit a mummy. Yet this mummy has a curse, and he starts killing people. And local sheriff has to try to figure out who's doing all these murders and put a stop to it. That's the whole story. So it's a very simple story, exactly what you expect. I think the art in this one is great. There are some really gory panels of some really violent, gruesome deaths. So the art is really fun. The story is simple, but it's effective. I will say what I didn't love about this one is that part of the narrative framing is that there is a cowboy character who is serving as an omniscient narrator, and he's explaining the events as they unfold. And I think it would have actually been more effective if we followed the sheriff as our primary point of view and kept him as a central character, because then you would have felt a more intimate connection with him. As it was, if everything felt removed, it felt a step away. But with that said, I had a good time reading it. It was fun. Like I said, I really enjoyed the art on this one. I thought it was graphic and exactly what you want a splatter Western comic to look like. What else can you ask for? Then the second one that I'm going to talk about came out in November. This is called The Bone Tribe by R.K. Latch. And this follows a group of bank robbers who are on the run after a heist, going through the desert, trying to get to Mexico. And in the middle of the desert, they come across a town that seems to have appeared out of nowhere, and they go there to take refuge, and not everything is as it seems. So I thought this story was really good. I liked this story quite a lot, but I don't think the artwork worked for the story. The art style in this one was much scratchier and like a sketch kind of style, and the art itself, any given frame, I enjoyed. I thought it was done really well, but there are a number of different characters, and especially when you don't have them in close-up, they kind of all look the same. It was hard to distinguish one character from the next. In the town, they meet all these different interesting characters, and the action is just a little bit muddled by the nature of this art style. So I didn't feel like the art style meshed with the story that it was trying to tell. They didn't work together, but they were both fun, and it was a quick, easy read. Again, the idea of a mystical town appearing in the middle of the desert isn't a new concept, and you know that it's not going to end well for anyone when you find a mystical town like that. Next is 3 Days to Death is Here by Scott Bryan Wilson. And of all of them, I think this is the simplest plot. Death is Here is the name of a town, and our main character is just outside of the town, and you find out that town has been taken over by the big bad, and they're holding someone hostage, and our main character wants to go free that hostage. And the antagonist is doing anything they can to stop them. So wave after wave of gunmen are coming out to try to kill our protagonist. Yet our protagonist has like a magical elixir that when he drinks it, he is immune to bullets. So he is just mowing down people left and right in order to get back to town to try to save this hostage. So it's very simple. There's nothing deeper than that going on. I thought the art in this one was great. There are some really, really dynamic frames that have a lot of action in them. And the way the frame zooms in and zooms out is very cinematic. So I thought the art in this one was really, really compelling. I really enjoyed it. The story was very simple. However, it did have a little bit of a twist at the end that I wasn't expecting. And so I thought that was nice. So this one I thought was a lot of fun. And again, the art in this one is really, really compelling, really dynamic, really cinematic. I really, really enjoyed it. Appreciated it quite a lot. There are a number of individual frames that you just want to kind of like frame. They're so beautiful. And then the last of the 4 comics is called Resurrection Hill, and this one's by Michel Garza. And I think of all the stories, in terms of actual storyline, this one was the most compelling and intimate story. The basic premise is that there is a standoff, and a young boy is shot by accident in the process. And that young boy's mother is out of town, and his stepfather knows that there is a witch that lives on the edge of town, and so he brings the boy to the witch to try to get him revived and brought back to life before his mother can come home and find out that she's lost her son. And nothing good ever happens when you bring someone back to life, and that's the case in this story as well. So I thought it was a really intimate story. It was exploring grief a little bit and loss and responsibility. Again, it was a one-shot comic, didn't have a lot of pages to do it, but I thought there was some depth there. I thought it was interesting. And I thought when things went wrong, they went wrong in like a spectacular way. It was a great twist. The art on this one also was not my favorite. Again, it was more of a sketch style, a little bit more of like an impressionist sketch style, as opposed to like a clean line, cartoonish style that you had in some of the other ones. But there were some scenes where it was really effective. There were like a couple reveal where there's like these monstrous images that kind of leapt out of the page. And this art style lent itself to being almost surreal and outside the realms of normality and almost impressionistic in that way. So there were some panels that I thought were really, really great. Overall, it wasn't my favorite art style, but it did complement the story and the kind of dreamlike, almost folk horror nature of the story that was superimposed on top of this Western genre. So of the 4 comics, I'd say that last one, Resurrection Hill, was my favorite in terms of both combination of a good story and the art. For art alone, I'd probably say the third one, 3 Days to Death is Here, had some of the most dynamic cinematic panels. But all 4 of them were a lot of fun. I'm really glad I read them. I read them actually on Hoopla, which is a digital service that my library subscribes to. But then I went and bought physical copies. If you want physical copies, it seems like you have to buy them directly from the publisher's website, and you can buy them in a bundle, so all 4 for a discounted price. Only the digital copies are available on Amazon. So if you want a physical copy, you have to get it through the publisher, as far as I can tell. But like I said, you can buy all 4 for a bundle. I definitely recommend it. If you're interested, I think you should pick them up. Even the ones that I didn't feel were super strong still had really great art to look at, and they were a lot of fun to read. And it's exciting that they're taking the Splatter Western series and they're going outside the realm of just novels and novellas to include these one-sheets. So the other entry into my Splatter Western project that I recently completed is a novella, and this is by John Wayne Comunale, and it is called All Your Dreams Will Come True When You're Dead. And this was an interesting one, let me tell you. I really liked the premise of this one. I thought some of the execution was not great. The premise is it's combining cosmic horror, like the most cosmic of Lovecraftian cosmic horror ideas, with the Old West. And so the premise is that there is a town, I suppose you call it, it's hard, I have no clue how to pronounce it, Cocytus, Cocytus, maybe? This town exists outside of time and space. And you find out that, and I'm not giving anything away, you find out that the person who's like running this town, he actually comes from another realm of existence named Oblivion, and his goal is to bring Oblivion to Earth, to our realm of existence. And the way he's doing that is by he's sending out these psychic calls to behemoth monsters that live in that realm to come through and to create a portal to our realm. And he is filling this town with souls. And because of that, for some cosmic math, I suppose, when the behemoth rips holes in space and time and comes to this town, the weight of all these souls will cause that hole to expand and cause the 2 realms to collapse on one another. So he's bringing Oblivion to Earth, and that's his goal. So that right away is an interesting setup. And part of the way he's achieving his goal is he needs to collect all these souls. So his right-hand protege is a young woman who has these psychic powers, and she uses her psychic powers to collect souls from nearby towns and just transport them to this town that exists outside of time and space. But for those souls, that those individuals that she can't collect, they send out basically bounty hunters to go and collect them and bring them. So the story is structured in a really fun way. every chapter moves across different perspectives. So you have the perspective of Lycus. He's the guy that runs this town, and his protege, Alistor. But then you also have the Calamity Three, which are like these three outlaws that are his henchmen. And then you have a gunfighter or a gunslinger, essentially, named Lloyd, who is one of the people that is psychically brought to this town. And then you have Lloyd's son, who is raised without a father. And the reason for that, you find out, is that when Lloyd travels to this town, since the town exists outside of time and space, his story happens only over the course of a day or so. But in our world, years have passed. So even though he left the home when the child was still barely walking, we meet the child as he grows up, and eventually you meet him. He becomes a gunslinger in his own right. Along with the son storyline, you also have like a nearby witch who kind of befriends him and works with him. So you have these number of different characters, and many of the chapters are short, 1-2 pages long, so you blow through them. And so it's very quick paced in that way, because you're constantly moving around and you don't stay in one place too long. That is also, though, kind of to the detriment of the novel, because you don't, at least for me, I didn't feel strongly connected to any of the characters because I didn't get to spend enough time with them. I think the biggest kind of detriment to the story is that you have all of these individual stories happening simultaneously, and they all revolve around this town that exists outside of time and space and what's happening there. They're all directly related to it. And the way the stories are told, it feels like they're convening to a central point, and that they'll all collapse and they'll all play a role in the end game of what happens. But the truth is, all of the secondary stories are just that, they're secondary. And so all of these secondary stories, whether it be the Calamity Three or Lloyd or his son, all of these stories have almost no bearing at all on the actual consequences of the plot and how things end up happening. If the whole story just stayed focused on Lycus and his protege, you would end up with the same results at the end. And so these stories felt like they were circling around to combine and to come into something bigger, but instead they were just circling around each other, and they didn't meet up in any meaningful way. And so that, I felt, was a little bit disappointing. I was really expecting them to come together in a more meaningful way. You could say that what it was doing was just showing a snapshot of what happens when this kind of disastrous cosmic plan is put into place, right? That it affects all these different people in interconnected ways. And so those stories may not have been contributing to the main plot, but it was showing a broader swath of what happens, and that's fine. But in a short novella like this, this isn't our town. This isn't some sort of like exploration of society. So it would have been nice to have all these stories connect in a more meaningful way. And short of that, it would have been nice to have a little more insight into the different characters. They felt very, all the characters, with the exception of possibly Lycus and his protege, felt pretty two-dimensional. Not simple stereotypes, but not far off from simple stereotypes. If we had spent more time with them, then we could have given them more depth. They could have been fleshed out in a little more interesting ways, as opposed to just being surface level or what you'd expect. Or if the story had combined them together in more interesting ways, then even at surface level, seeing all the pieces fit together would have been exciting and fun. But since you didn't have either one of those things, it felt like a lot of wasted opportunity, really. That was the biggest problem. It wasn't that it wasn't well written or it wasn't fun. It just felt like it had a lot of potential that it set itself up for, and then it didn't live up to that potential. However, like I said, it was a novella. I read it in a day. It was really short. It was fun to see these like really big cosmic ideas put into this Western landscape. Continuing with the vibe of the other entries in the Splatter Western series, there were a few scenes that were like very graphic and over the top and borderline exploitative. I don't think there were as many trigger warnings you would need in this one as some of the others. It wasn't quite as gory and graphic, but it was, it had an undercurrent of violence that informed everything happening. And so it felt like a very traditional Western in that way. And this idea of the only way to be a man is to be a good gunfighter and so forth. So I thought it fit really well in the series. I had a good time reading it. I do recommend it, but I do feel like it didn't live up to its potential that it created for itself by having such a dynamic pacing structure and by having enough interesting subplots happening that they really could have convened in some way that made them greater than the sum of their parts. So that didn't quite happen. Still, I recommend it. I don't think it was the strongest of the Splatter Westerns I've read thus far, but it was a good entry and it was fun to read. And if you wanted to, it did kind of explore these ideas of how we're all interconnected and how all these different disparate players somehow have webs connecting them to others, and how an action in one place will have consequences somewhere else down the line. And so there is some sort of, deeper ideas at play. And there are more things to think about, looking at how we affect others and how also we kind of inherit the legacy of our parents and we inherit the legacy of those around us. What it means to grow up in a town where the majority of the male population has been culled and those that are left are just trying to keep the town afloat. What does it mean to be a paradigm or embody masculinity in a place like that? So those are interesting ideas that it touches upon, but it doesn't really go into them in depth. But there is enough kind of gristle there that you can chew on it and have some thought-provoking conversations based on that if you so choose. I think that's about it for me. So that is 4 comics and 1 novella, continuing my project of reading all of the entries in the Splatter Western series. I hope you enjoyed these. Let me know, have you read any of these comics or this novella? How are you getting along with the Splatter Western series? Is anyone else reading them along with me or interested in them? Or am I the only one that's so compelled by this series that I'm going to read all of them? I'd love to hear your thoughts down below. Until then, thank you so much for joining me today. I appreciate you. Be kind to yourself, take care of each other, and go slowly.